First, you have to look at what Maine state law says. The Secretary of State has to determine whether the individual meets the qualifications or not before they can be on the ballot. And in this particular case, thank you, Shanna. Thank you, Secretary of State. You made the decision that Donald Trump does not meet those qualifications because, according to the 14th Amendment, Section 3, he was involved in inciting an insurrection against this country and egged those people on to do what they wanted to do to the Capitol. And therefore, she's made the decision that he is not qualified to be on our ballot.
So as we discussed on the program yesterday, Maine did become this week the second state to bar Donald Trump from the GOP primary ballot. And since the story broke right before we went live, there are more details that we can now discuss, including the fact that it was for, as with Colorado, engaging in insurrection or rebellion. And the difference really is that unlike in Colorado, where the Colorado Supreme Court was the body that ruled on this, in this case, it does come from one individual office holder who is in this case affiliated with the Democratic Party, but I'm sure the Republicans aren't going to focus on that. So basically, this is Shenna Bellows, Maine Secretary of State. And look, we gave you the quotes yesterday. She says effectively that under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, he engaged in insurrection, and the text is pretty clear. So we've been continuing to debate this on the program. We'll probably do so right now. But before we launch into that conversation, I do want to remind you of the exact wording of Section 3, because the vast majority of people, especially on cable news, particularly right-wing cable news, commenting on the story, would really like to pretend that nobody knows exactly what it says. It's all ambiguous. But what it says is, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Now, I do think that there are a couple of different areas where things are not necessarily as clear as they might be. And thus, the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in clearly. And bear in mind, by the way, that although this was an individual office holder rather than a state Supreme Court, like in Colorado, Shenna Bellows has already paused her order. But we do want to give you a little bit of her argument in support of it. She said, I am mindful that no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I am also mindful, however, that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection. Trump's occasional requests that rioters be peaceful and support law enforcement do not immunize his actions. I would add, particularly because he waited hours and hours to do that. But Trump was aware of the tinder laid by his multi-month effort to delegitimize a Democratic election and then chose to light a match. And so we are, of course, going to have to wait until the Supreme Court weighs in. They haven't even assured us that they're going to do that, but we expect that they're basically going to be forced to. You've got 2 states now that have said he's going to be knocked off. Some, like California, since Colorado, have said that he will still be allowed on. There's ambiguity. This is the place for the Supreme Court. So I'm gonna start with you, Raivana. What do you make of this and the fact that it is an individual Democratic affiliated office holder?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I really like the statement she put out because these are unprecedented decisions, but we're also living in unprecedented times. And I agree that the more states make these decisions, the more likely it is. And I'm certain the Supreme Court will weigh in on this issue. And for everyone who's celebrating Trump being taken off the ballots, I would urge you to pump the brakes and put zero faith in the Supreme Court, lest you be severely disappointed down the road, because I don't foresee any universe in which they don't reverse these decisions. As you mentioned, John, and as I sort of laid out last week when we were discussing the Colorado decision on your show, there is a legal argument to make on both sides that isn't just coming from a very biased conservative point of view. Can listen to the conversation we had there, anyone who's interested in hearing that. I don't think it necessarily bears repeating now. But as far as, and I've already seen some think pieces being written up about this, whether or not people should be cautious about the fact that this is one individual making this decision, one Secretary of State. I think we all need to keep in mind that the laws in Maine differ greatly from a majority of the other states, in which the Secretary of State in Maine is put in a quasi-judicial role, where the impetus to make this decision really does come down to the Secretary of State. And it's a completely reasonable position to come to, that Donald Trump violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment by inciting an insurrection. And it doesn't need to, and Republicans are going to argue this, but it doesn't need to be a criminal proceeding to determine that he engaged in an insurrection to fulfill the requirements of this section of the Constitution. Absolutely not. And so, I don't think that this decision is going to stand. And maybe we can get into later some of the reasons why I think the DNC might not want it to stand politically from their perspectives. But we're going to be getting a lot of propaganda coming out from the Republican Party as a result of this. It's already begun.
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that we're even having this discussion that this guy's not behind bars. And the Secretary of State in Maine has decided that he's not eligible to run for president. The only thing that this guy should be eligible for is parole in 10 to 15 years. He should not be out right now. The fact that there's people supporting this guy has said he's gonna run this country into the ground and get rid of democracy and make it an autocracy. There's an argument to be made that, I mean, he's a big criminal, we all know, whether it's financial, there's an argument to be made that the insurrection that he led was the cause of the people that died that day, whether it's Ashley Babbitt or any other law enforcement official or anyone else. And so the fact, I get the idea that, as Rayvon is saying, it's true that obviously, if I had to bet on it, we would bet that it's not going to stand, this ruling, nor the Colorado one. By the way, the Colorado one, if I'm not mistaken, was brought by some Republicans. Am I right? And so there's a lot of people that are of sane mind that know this guy shouldn't be running. And then there's a lot of people that continue to support this guy that once they're out of office or that nothing else is on the line for their careers, then they come out of sane mind and they say this guy shouldn't be running for office. And then there's a lot of people that are living in fear of this guy that just support this guy and have this guy holding us hostage. There's a small percentage of the population that, out and out supports this guy. And here we are, and it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that this is even a question.
Yeah, it is. Like, we're gonna get into a debate about exactly what should the trigger be for whether you're involved in insurrection. But yeah, it is crazy that it's been a couple of years and he theoretically could suffer no consequences whatsoever. Like, he shot his shot on January 6th. I think it says in the Constitution, if you come for the king, you best not miss. And the dude missed. And he's still out there, and so far nothing has happened.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.